Do you want to talk about the Team Clark comment and all that?
Oh, I made a bad joke.
Yeah.
I made a really bad joke.
A really badly timed joke in poor taste.
Remember, Team Clark didn't bother to show up. Oh, well, now Kelsey Plum's trying to backtrack on that. She's trying to walk it back, trying to moonwalk it back.
Well, well, well. Look who's back trying to do damage control after her comedy career crashed and burned at the All-Star Game. Kelsey Plum just dropped a podcast appearance where she's desperately trying to convince everyone that her completely tone-deaf comments about Caitlin Clark's team were just innocent jokes that got blown out of proportion. What started as a questionable decision to throw shade during a nationally televised event has now turned into a full explanation tour where Plum is working overtime to make herself look like the victim in a situation she created entirely by herself. The Las Vegas guard apparently thinks a few podcast appearances can magically erase the fact that she chose to take shots at the league's biggest star during what was supposed to be a celebration of women's basketball.
Yeah, it was like a positive, fun All-Star game, and you were trying to just make a joke. And it just got twisted.
And I should have, like, hindsight 2020, because of the shirts, because of the fans, like, I should have known it was a way more serious moment than a typical All-Star game.
Yeah.
Because I went into that press conference very, like, happy-go-lucky, we won, you know?
Smash that like button and drop PLUM'S done in the comments, because watching someone try to explain away their own poor judgment is always entertaining content. The whole mess started during All-Star Weekend when Kelsey Plum decided that a press conference was the perfect venue to mention that 0 members of Team Clark showed up to some CBA meeting. Instead of focusing on the positive momentum the league was building or celebrating the incredible growth and popularity, Plum chose to highlight what she saw as unprofessional behavior from the players who happened to be driving most of that growth. The comment itself was awkward enough, but the way she delivered it with that little smirk like she was dropping some kind of bombshell revelation made the whole thing even more cringeworthy.
You know, not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that.
This is coming from someone who should probably be thanking Caitlin Clark for the increased attention and revenue that's benefiting every player in the league, yet somehow found it appropriate to call out the very people responsible for her bigger paychecks. But here's where it gets really interesting, because now Kelsey Plum is out here acting like she's shocked that people didn't appreciate her stand-up routine during a serious basketball event. According to her latest explanation on some podcasts, she was just trying to make a lighthearted joke about Team Clark being hungover and missing the meeting, as if publicly questioning the professionalism of your colleagues is somehow peak comedy material.
Hey, like, Team Clark, like, they didn't make it to the meeting either, you know, like, just like making a joke, trying to make the room lighter.
Because they were hungover. That was the joke, yes?
Yeah, even though they called, sorry. I was making a joke that they were hungover, even though our team nickname was hungover.
Yes.
Yes. So it's like, at least we made it.
I stand by this. Kelsey Plum needs to stop trying to be funny. We've all seen, remember the popcorn thing?
Kelsey Plum in the building, enjoying the popcorn apparently. The 2017 Wooden Award winner.
I think it's one of those things where it's like, I think a lot of what Kelsey Plum thinks is going to be funny, it just does not hit well.
The woman genuinely seemed surprised that calling the league's most popular players a bunch of irresponsible party animals didn't get the laugh she was apparently expecting from the basketball community. What makes this whole apology tour even more amusing is how Plum keeps trying to frame herself as a misunderstood comedian whose brilliant humor just didn't translate properly to the masses. She's sitting there talking about how players have personalities and how sarcastic comments can get twisted, completely missing the point that maybe timing and audience matter when you're trying to be funny.
How many times have we seen WNBA players speak to the media and not know what to say? How many times have we seen players crash out on social media? How many times? But these are professional athletes, the leader of women, the leader of kids, people that somebody look up to. And these women always, forever and a day, crashes out on the damn internet.
And it was a serious moment because I think part of it, too, was people turned into the All-Star Game fired up, wanted to see what was going on with the All-Star Game, whatever, and then next thing you know, all the players come out wearing these T-shirts, and it sort of sucked the air out of the All-Star Game's room, or the room out of, whatever, the air out of the room that the All-Star Game was played in. It's like, what is this?
It's like watching someone tell a joke at a funeral, and then acting confused about why nobody's laughing, the lack of self-awareness is honestly impressive in its own way. The best part about her explanation is listening to Plum complain about how she never got a chance to properly explain what she meant, as if there was some magical context that would make her comments sound less petty. She keeps going on about how social media twisted her words and how people ran with the story without understanding her intent, which is basically the adult equivalent of saying, "That's not what I meant," after getting caught saying exactly what you meant. The fake confusion about why people reacted negatively is almost as entertaining as the original comment itself.
Like a sarcastic comment or something that's trying to tell a joke, like people can run with it. And there's like another aspect when it's like you never even get a chance to explain it. It's like what are you going to do?
So right here, a lot of people responded, a bad joke. Kelsey Dumb's the reason every player in the WNBA needs PR training. Plum is not very bright. I mean, come on. Kelsey deserves all the negative remarks and comments she got. A person can't try to explain it or say sorry after the fact because it only looks like you got caught and you want to seem like you're sorry. Yeah, you wouldn't have been sorry if you hadn't got caught. I get it. I'll say it once again, the WNBA sucks at PR. Laughing my ass off, this is all damage control, and she still manages to come off as unlikable and completely disingenuous.
But wait, it gets even better because now she's trying to act like she's some kind of victim of the media landscape who just made an innocent mistake that anyone could have made. Plum is out here talking about how she should have known it was a more serious moment than a typical All-Star game, as if the gravity of publicly criticizing your colleagues somehow escaped her brilliant mind until after the fact. The hindsight 2020 routine is classic damage control, but it's pretty hard to buy when the original comment was so clearly intentional and pointed. What's really telling about this whole situation is how Plum keeps emphasizing that everyone wore the Unity shirts and was on the same page, while conveniently glossing over the fact that she was the one who decided to break that unity by calling out specific players.
Yeah. Obviously, we're all on the same page. We all wore the shirts, we're all unified. And I think, if anything, I was just more discouraged because I felt like it took away from the moment of what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you don't even get to respond. And if you do, you seem defensive. That's why I didn't even say anything. I was like, all right.
No, so that's the thing. You'd seem defensive, and then it just gets worse.
Yeah, so you just have to let it go.
Yeah.
Thick skin.
She's trying to have it both ways, claiming she supports team solidarity while simultaneously being the person who created division by making her little joke about professional athletes being too hungover to attend important meetings. The mental gymnastics required to make that logic work must be exhausting. The timing of this explanation tour is also pretty convenient, coming after months of watching Caitlin Clark absolutely dominate the conversation around women's basketball. It's hard not to notice that Plum's original comments came right after a season where Clark was breaking records and bringing unprecedented attention to the league. Now she's trying to clean up her mess while Clark continues to be the face of the sport's growth and success. The contrast between someone creating drama and someone creating positive change couldn't be more obvious. What makes this even more awkward is listening to Plum try to downplay the whole controversy as just people looking for something to be mad about, when in reality she handed them exactly what they needed on a silver platter.
It made her look awfully unlikable. And I actually thought she was like one of my more favorite, interesting players for a long time. And some of the ways I've seen her talk and profess things, and some of the things that she said, she lost me. I was like, her attitude sucks. There. I said it out loud. Constantly sarcastic and acting like people are taking up her time. Okay, you're a WNBA player. You're not out here curing cancer. All right? You're not.
She made a pointed comment about the league's biggest stars during a nationally televised event, and now she's acting surprised that it became a story. It's like throwing a rock through a window and then being shocked that someone called the police about property damage. The fake remorse about how her joke took away from the moment they were trying to create is particularly rich, considering she was the one who chose to create a different moment entirely by bringing up who did and didn't show up to meetings. If you really cared about the unity and the message, maybe don't use that same platform to air grievances about your colleagues' attendance records. The logic doesn't exactly add up when you examine it for more than 5 seconds. But here's what's really interesting about this whole mess. Instead of just taking the L and moving on like a professional, Plum decided that the best course of action was to go on a media tour where she could explain why everyone else was wrong for reacting the way they did. A simple, "my bad, poor timing" would have been infinitely more effective than this elaborate explanation about misunderstood humor and unfair reactions. Sometimes the cover-up is worse than the crime, and this is definitely one of those situations. The broader issue here is that this whole controversy represents exactly the kind of internal drama and negativity that held the WNBA back for years before players like Caitlin Clark came along and showed what the league could be when everyone focused on basketball instead of petty grievances. While Clark was busy breaking barriers and bringing new fans to the sport, we had veterans more concerned with who showed up to what meeting and whether people were taking things seriously enough for their liking. What's particularly frustrating is that Kelsey Plum actually had the opportunity to be part of something special during that All-Star weekend, but instead chose to focus on minor complaints rather than celebrating the incredible momentum the league was building. She could have used her platform to highlight the positive changes, support her fellow players, and show fans what real leadership looks like. Instead, she decided to create unnecessary drama that distracted from the actual achievements that should have been the focus. The most revealing aspect of this whole situation is how it highlights the difference between players who understand what's good for the league and those who are still stuck in old ways of thinking. You have people like Caitlin Clark who recognize that success comes from elevating the entire sport and bringing positive attention to women's basketball. Then you have situations like this where established players seem more interested in maintaining hierarchies and calling out perceived slights than embracing the growth and opportunities that new stars are creating for everyone. Looking at the bigger picture, this Kelsey Plum controversy serves as a perfect example of how not to handle media opportunities when you're representing your sport on a national stage. The original comment was questionable judgment, but the extended explanation tour has turned it into a much bigger story than it ever needed to be. Sometimes, the best response to making a mistake is acknowledging it briefly and moving on, rather than creating more content for people to analyze and criticize. The bottom line is that Kelsey Plum's attempt to explain away her All-Star comments has probably created more negative attention than just letting the original story fade away naturally would have accomplished. When you're in a hole, the first rule is to stop digging, but apparently nobody shared that wisdom before she decided to do a podcast tour about her misunderstood sense of humor. At least we can all appreciate the entertainment value of watching someone try to convince the world that their obvious mistake was actually everyone else's fault for not getting the joke. What's even more fascinating about this whole saga is how Plum keeps doubling down on the idea that her joke was actually perfectly reasonable and everyone else just overreacted. She's out here acting like she's some kind of comedy martyr who was unfairly crucified for trying to bring levity to a serious situation. The complete lack of self-reflection is honestly remarkable when you consider that professional athletes usually have media training specifically designed to prevent these kinds of unforced errors. Either the aces need to invest in better PR coaching, or Plum just decided to ignore everything they taught her about reading the room before opening her mouth. The most entertaining part of her explanation is how she keeps emphasizing that Team Clark was nicknamed Team Hungover, as if that somehow makes her comment less problematic. Like, congratulations, Kelsey. You managed to make a joke that was both unfunny and based on a premise that makes it sound even worse when you explain the context. Calling professional athletes hungover during their biggest weekend of the year isn't exactly the flex she seems to think it is. It's like watching someone explain why their offensive joke is actually hilarious once you understand all the offensive details they left out the first time. But let's talk about the real elephant in the room here, which is how this whole controversy perfectly illustrates the generational tension that's been brewing in the WNBA for the past couple of years. You have veterans like Plum who seem genuinely bothered by the attention and success that younger players are bringing to the league, even though that success benefits everyone. It's giving serious back-in-my-day energy, except instead of walking uphill both ways to school, it's complaining about players not taking meetings seriously enough while simultaneously benefiting from their star power and marketability. The irony is absolutely delicious when you consider that Kelsey Plum plays for the Las Vegas Aces, a team that should theoretically be championship contenders, but has spent recent seasons looking increasingly mediocre, while teams with younger stars continue to generate more excitement and attention. Maybe, instead of worrying about who shows up to what meetings, the focus should be on figuring out why veteran-led teams keep underperforming while the young guns are setting records and selling out arenas. Just a thought, but basketball success might be more important than meeting attendance when it comes to actually advancing the sport. What makes this situation even more ridiculous is how Plum keeps talking about wanting to make the room lighter during a serious moment, as if anyone asked her to be the comedy relief during a press conference about collective bargaining and player unity. The audacity to appoint yourself as the person responsible for mood management during a professional media event is honestly impressive in its own way. It's like watching someone crash a wedding to do stand-up comedy and then acting confused about why the bride's family isn't laughing at jokes about the groom's bachelor party. The timing aspect that Plum keeps mentioning as her defense actually makes everything worse when you think about it critically. She's admitting that she knew it was a more serious moment than usual, but still chose to make her little joke anyway. That's not a mistake or poor timing. That's deliberately choosing to create drama during a moment that called for professionalism and unity. The "I should have known better" routine only works if you can convincingly argue that you didn't actually know better at the time, which becomes pretty hard to sell when you're simultaneously explaining how you understood the gravity of the situation. Another hilarious aspect of this whole damage control tour is how Plum keeps emphasizing that everyone was unified and wearing the same shirts, while completely ignoring the fact that her comments were literally designed to highlight division and point out who wasn't participating fully. You can't claim to support unity while actively creating disunity and then act surprised when people notice the contradiction. It's like organizing a team dinner and then spending the entire meal complaining about who showed up late, except you're doing it on national television during the league's biggest weekend. The podcast appearance itself is also worth examining because it reveals just how out of touch Plum is with how her comments were actually received by fans and media. She's sitting there talking about crown apple shots and happy-go-lucky attitudes like she's reminiscing about college spring break rather than addressing a professional controversy that reflected poorly on the entire league. The casual, almost dismissive tone she takes when discussing the backlash shows that she still doesn't really understand why people were upset in the first place. What's particularly grating is how Plum keeps framing this as a learning experience about social media and public perception, rather than acknowledging that maybe the problem was her judgment in making the comment at all. She's treating this like a case study in how jokes can be misinterpreted online, when the reality is that her joke was pretty clearly understood exactly as intended. People weren't confused about her meaning. They were upset about her choice to publicly criticize colleagues during a moment that called for solidarity and professionalism. The whole crown apple excuse is also pretty revealing when you think about it, because she's essentially admitting that she was under the influence when she made comments that affected her professional reputation and potentially damaged relationships with colleagues. That's not exactly the kind of excuse that makes someone look more professional or responsible. If anything, it raises questions about whether alcohol was affecting her judgment during other parts of the All-Star weekend, which isn't exactly the narrative you want to create when you're trying to rehabilitate your image. Looking at this from a broader perspective, the Kelsey Plum controversy serves as a perfect case study in how not to handle public relations in the social media age. Every step of her response has managed to make the situation worse rather than better. From the original comment to the extended explanation tour that's kept the story alive far longer than it needed to be. At this point, she's probably created more negative content about herself than her critics ever could have generated on their own. The most frustrating part for fans of women's basketball is watching this kind of unnecessary drama distract from all the positive momentum the league has been building. While players like Caitlin Clark are out there breaking records, selling merchandise, and bringing new audiences to the sport, we're still dealing with veterans who seem more interested in creating controversy than capitalizing on the incredible opportunities that growth is creating for everyone. It's the kind of backwards thinking that held the WNBA back for years before the current generation of stars showed what was possible when players focused on elevating the game rather than tearing each other down. At the end of the day, Kelsey Plum's handling of this entire situation will probably be remembered as a masterclass in how to turn a minor controversy into a major distraction through poor decision making and, even worse, damage control. The original comment was questionable but salvageable with a quick apology and course correction. Instead, we got an extended explanation tour that's managed to keep negative attention focused on the league during what should be a time of celebration and forward momentum. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for your sport is to get out of your own way, but apparently that lesson hasn't made it to Las Vegas yet.